Welcome back to my channel and to another episode of this Redux course. In the previous episode, we started to look at Redux Toolkit, which is a wrapper, which is a layer on top of Redux. We saw configure store, create action, create reducer, and we also made a refactoring exercise from this Redux code, which was the kind of the classic way to write Redux logic, to modern Redux with Redux Toolkit. And in this lesson we will talk about Redux middleware, first in the context of a classic Redux application, and then in the context of a modern Redux code base. Before looking at the code, let's see a couple of slides. So, what is middleware in Redux? The concept is not new to Redux. If you ever worked with any backend framework or micro framework like Express.js, or with frameworks like Django with Python, you may know this concept of middleware. And the middleware is something that is able to intercept the flow of the application. For example, in Django, the middleware is able to intercept the request, add something to the response. In Express.js, the concept is more or less the same. There are many middlewares that you can plug in. In Redux, the middleware is something slightly different in the sense that yes, you can plug into the Redux lifecycle with a middleware, but it is not strictly related to requests and responses. Let's see a representation, a graphical representation of the architecture of Redux, where there is also the middleware. We saw that typical Redux application has a store and the UI. This store is made from a reducer. The reducer could be a function, there could be more than one reducer, and to produce the next state of the application, the reducer must take state as a parameter. So the initial state of the application is passed inside the reducer, and when some action of any kind reaches the reducer, this function is able to produce the next state. So to produce the next state, the reducer gets also the action object. We saw that the action in Redux is a simple object made of at least one property named type. The type property is required for Redux to work. There could be also a payload that is an arbitrary object or a string or whatever you want that you can carry inside the action. So when the reducer takes the state and looks at the action object, depending on the type of that action, the next state is produced. Now, there are a lot of things we can do in a web application. We can fetch data, we can respond to user events, we may have, and we always have, some kind of complex logic, some business logic. Where do you put the logic will be really impactful on your application, on your code base. That means that if you have some UI, some piece of UI, or some React components that does too much things, that could lead to a not so maintainable code base the more you add logic. And for that reason, there should be something that holds your core logic, gives you the ability to decouple this complex logic, this business logic, from your UI. The Redux middleware is exactly that spot in your application where you will handle synchronous logic, or maybe logging and analytics, or talking to APIs. And that middleware is important because the way it works is that it lets you intercept any action before this action reaches the reducer. So we have the store and we have the UI. The reducer takes state and action. Now, anytime the interface wants to change the state of the application, it has to send an action dispatch to the store. And when this action dispatch reaches the store, it gets passed to the reducer. You can plug in a middleware in the middle of this logic. So the middleware will live inside the store and will intercept the action object before this action will reach the reducer. We also saw that when the next state of the application is ready, the interface can subscribe to the store with the subscribe function, and anytime there is a state change, the interface can react to that state change and update the UI accordingly. Having seen this architecture, let's see how to use a Redux middleware inside your codebase. This is the first example that we created in the previous episodes. With create store, we have action creators, named actions, well, there is a reducer, and so on. If you remember, we're factored to Redux Toolkit. But for now, let's stick with this classic Redux code. To apply a middleware inside the store, because the middleware must be applied in the store, first thing first, let's import the apply middleware function. The apply middleware function must be passed inside create store, and this function takes a list of middlewares that will be applied to the store. Usually middlewares are declared inside an array for convenience, and you'll spread the array here with this spread syntax. Now, what can you do with a middleware? The most common application for middleware is logging. For example, if you want to log your actions, the payload, if you want to maybe report out some error that happened in your application. In fact, error logging is one of the most common applications for a middleware. The middleware is also used for asynchronous actions. In the next episode, we will see asynchronous actions in Redux with Redux Thunk, which is a custom middleware. For now, we will limit to a simple middleware that could log all our actions. Now, in the previous episode, I created this HTML file that is used by Webpack. Let's copy over this HTML because I need it here. And we will also import our module here, src. It's index.js, which is this file which lives in topmost folder here. Let me run this application at this point, not with Webpack, but with npx serve. That is a really convenient tool for serving static files locally. Now let me open up this URL in my browser. Okay, we have this button, click me. Let's fix this section by adding our first middleware. So what is a middleware in the end? It is a function. Now, in a later tutorial, you will find out that middleware is declared as an arrow function. I don't have anything against arrow function, but I think that for beginners that it is just starting out with Redux, a regular function for illustrating the middleware is more simple to grasp. So a middleware is a function, and this function takes as a parameter store. So you can imagine that, let me enlarge this code, you can imagine that given having access to store, you can call store.getState, store.getState, dispatch. Okay, so given that store is an object, you can also destructure, and depending on what you need, you can just get dispatch and get state, or simply dispatch. Now, the middleware is, let me leave here store for now. Now, the middleware is a function. The funny thing about this function, not so funny in reality, is that it must return another function. And this function takes next as a parameter. Now, next is another function. Let me write here. Next is a function. And this function will be called later for moving forward the application. That means that if you forget to call next, the application will break. And we will see in a moment what it means. Now, this outer function must return an inner function, and this inner function must return another function. Inside these two functions is the core of your middleware. In fact, if I put a console log here, I can log the action. Again, not forgetting to return next action. I know that it is so much for beginners, but this is the middleware. As a mnemonic for remembering middlewares, I use this acronym NANA, which stands for next action, next action. So whenever I have to write a middleware, recall this acronym NANA, and somehow I remember that I need to write a function that takes next as a parameter, another function that takes action as a parameter, and as a last step I need to return next action. Now, now that we have this simple middleware here, we applied the middleware here with apply middleware, and we spread the middleware array here. We can pass logger middleware inside this array. Let me refresh the application. Now, when clicking here, since I'm logging all the actions inside the application, I am expecting that whenever I click here, I can see something in this console. In fact, if I click here, I can see my two actions. The first action is button clicked, the second action is div visible, and this first action, button clicked, carries also my payload. We saw with Redux Toolkit that this payload is not serializable because it is a DOM element, and Redux Toolkit will give you a warning. For now, we're good. We will fix that in the next moves. What's important is that we applied middleware. Now, let's see what happens if I comment this line of code. Let's go again in the browser. Let me click me. As you can see, nothing works anymore. I can still see my actions that are logged to the console, but Redux working does not appear anymore in the page because Redux is unable to move forward. The application gets interrupted by this middleware. So always remember to return next action. I said that you can use store inside a middleware. In fact, if we log store.getState here, you can see that the state of the application is logged in the console. This is the action and this is the state. Now, to some extent, this is a do-it-yourself Redux dev tool. which we saw that is enabled by default in a Redux toolkit. This is our middleware in action. What can I say about middlewares? You can dispatch other actions with store.dispatch. Here you will pass an object or an action creator. Okay, so this is our simple middleware. Now there is no Redux dev tool injected here because I don't want to annoy you with too much code. Let me stop this application because now we'll see we'll run the application with Webpack. And at this point, Webpack will take this index.js with Redux Toolkit and will inject the bundle here in this other HTML file. So npm run start, and in the Redux Toolkit code base, we will copy over that middleware. Now, this is still working, so let's copy over this middleware. Oh, by the way, you can have many middlewares in our Redux application. We'll expand on that topic later. For now, let's stick with just a single middleware. So let me copy the middleware here. As you can see, there is no much organization in this code. This is intentional. So we've got this logger middleware. What if we want to apply this middleware to Redux with Redux Toolkit? First thing first, we saw that configure store, which is this function from Redux Toolkit, takes an object with options. Read user is the first option that you can pass to configure store. There is also middleware. So with this option, you can pass your middlewares. Now, let's see this, get the full middleware. If we take a look at this documentation, you can see that configure store gives you also these two middlewares, Redux immutable state invariant and serializable state invariant middleware, which is, if you remember, that middleware that warned you about that non-serializable payload. So Redux Toolkit already has three middlewares include. If we overwrite this property here, if we pass an empty array or just a single array, these default middlewares are not included anymore. So to apply a middleware in Redux Toolkit with configure store, you have this option, middleware, where you pass an array with your middlewares. But also, you need, if you want to use that default middlewares that already include, you need to pass also this function get default middleware. This function will load Redux Thunk and that two other middleware. Okay, so how to use a middleware in Redux Toolkit? This middleware option with configure store, it can be assigned with this get default middleware and logger middleware. Here is our logger middleware here. Let's open up this page again. Let me open up the browser console. If I click here, I can see that my simple application is still working, and also we have our logger middleware that is logging our actions here, button clicked and invisible, and is also logging the state of the application. Redux Dev Tool, it now at this point works because again Redux Toolkit takes care of applying this store and inserts for you, and this is a big win with when using Redux Toolkit. Okay, to recap, we saw what is a middleware in Redux. We saw that it is a function that returns a function, that returns another function, is able to intercept actions before they reach the reducer. And that gives you a powerful tool to plug into the Redux lifecycle. When using classic Redux functions, you can apply a middleware with apply middleware. Things will get a bit more complex if you want to use DevTool with apply middleware, but luckily with Redux Toolkit you don't have to worry anymore, because Configure Store are ready as Redux DevTool. And to apply a middleware with Redux Toolkit, you can use this middleware property, where you pass an array with your middleware. For example, if you have another middleware here, you can pass it like so, plus the default middlewares. It's everything for now. If you have any question, please feel free to comment. In the next episode, we will see asynchronous actions with Redux Thunk and with a custom middleware. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for the next episodes. See you later.